why do I even want my PO to read my tests? I mean, so this has been something that's been promised by the community since Fit or Fitness way back in the day. And then on into the whole BDD movement and Cucumber and all that. We're going to allow people who are not developers to read the tests, and that'll be the magic way that we all communicate. And yet, so few projects have ever had anyone but developers read tests. So if we make them readable and people still don't read them, what's the point? Why would we want to make tests that are readable by a PO? Well, the answer is because it helps you. It helps the developer. It doesn't actually even need to be read by the PO in order for that legibility to really be of a lot of benefit. So let's explore. Now, why? Of course, to understand why it needs to be readable, we have to understand first, why do we want to test at all? I mean, we're talking about automated tests here. At least I assume we are. So automated tests, they don't serve the role that we often think of for tests. Like when we think of testing and quality assurance and all that, it's about finding bugs. But automated tests are crap at finding bugs. They just don't find them. We frequently run the tests, and yet over and over and over, no bugs found, no bugs found, no bugs found. And then bugs do happen, and they escape the test because there were things that we didn't think to test. So why do we even write the tests if they aren't about finding bugs? Well, it's because they aren't about finding bugs. Tests are written to make ideas explicit. Right? When the idea is just in the developer's head, and then the code that implements the idea is explicitly in the code base, the idea is still implicit. Only its implementation is explicit. The test takes that original idea, that purpose, that intention, and makes it also explicit. So now we can look at the intention and at the code that implements the intention and see whether those two explicit things make sense. And once something's explicit, we can communicate about it. Right? And then it also has this benefit that we can verify that the implementation actually meets the intention. But honestly, that's just a side benefit, and it's not really that important. Because the real problem is that we don't understand the intention. It isn't explicit. So, if tests are all about making intention explicit, then obviously we should have really intention-focused tests, acceptance tests. We should have these tests that think about it from the customer perspective, that look at what do they want, what are they trying to accomplish, what are they willing to do. Right? The problem is that those tests historically, while they focus on that, they miss a whole lot of details that we as developers need for the implementation. So we also have these micro-tests, and micro-tests are small and fast, and they don't access databases or networks or other slow, annoying things. They don't introduce randomization. They're completely deterministic. They've got all these properties that make it so that we can be very, very precise, very explicit about what we want the computer to do. Really handy. And so the usual solution is that we end up with one suite of acceptance tests that are relevant, and another suite of unit tests which are useful and detailed. And we have no tests that are both relevant and useful or actionable. Right? So Deeproots suggests a crazy proposal of why don't we make all our tests both relevant and actionable? Right? Let's make them acceptance microtests. Of course, that was thrown out long ago because it's impossible. Anytime that you go to write an acceptance test, then it gets big and it focuses on things that customers care about. And that's just, it takes so much code to do anything that's useful that the result is in the acceptance test, since it's verifying something useful, must execute so much code that it can no longer be useful or actionable. Right? Well, there's a solution to that. And if you want to see how, read below, where we take one example of an acceptance-y sort of integration test and we convert it to be an acceptance microtest. And we show the various processes and steps. Look down below, see all the details. Now, the result of having done that is that we have clear customer intent. The test, once you get to the bottom of this, clearly conveys exactly what the customer cares about, and it is something that the customer cares about. And it really pushes us towards domain-driven design, because the implementation of that test is written entirely in terms of the production code. There aren't any fixtures or adapters or Cucumber modifications of language to go from this format to that format that hide a lot of code. Right? Instead, the intent must be describable directly in terms of actions on the the objects. And one of those objects is named the test subject, which means that that's the only one that is allowed to actually be involved in the thing that we're verifying. It requires that every single piece of customer intent have a single place in the code to live. Subtle and profound. That is cohesion. Right? So this is driving us towards domain-driven design. Being able to refactor this test requires our design to actually be a clear expression of the customer's intent. And that's the value to us. Because once we have those designs that clearly define the customer intent, everything is easier to debug. We can read the code and actually see what it means. We can hear what the customer wants and go to the part of the code that's related to that. Right? And all of our tests, of course, define what the customer wants and exactly which piece of code is it. And if you want to know more about how you can apply this to your real code, of course, hit me up at the next Whiskey Talk if you ask me anything. But that's a little ways away. So we've got a couple opportunities before that. First and most salient to this is a chance for your product owner to get together with us and refactor a contract, to learn about refactoring. Now, we were talking here about testing, so why am I going into refactoring? It's because of that domain-driven design. Right? The essence here of making your tests be acceptance microtests requires focusing on refactoring. And if your product owner understands how to refactor and really focus code from what it's doing right now to a clarity about the customer need, then that will make this whole process that you're trying to do a lot easier on getting clear product owner readable tests. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you around at our next event.